Hi, my name is Reverend Bruce Swingle, and I am the lead chaplain at the Stratton VA Medical Center in Albany, New York. The title of this presentation is Preventing Gun Violence and Suicides, All Hands on Deck. I would like to start with a quote from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We truly are spiritual beings having a human experience. In our world today, that experience can be intensified by exposure to other and self-directed violence, much of which we may feel powerless to change. But we don't have to stand idly by, and so we are asking for your help. Let me explain. The Department of Veterans Affairs recognizes that violence prevention, especially the prevention of suicides, is an effort that requires everyone's help to be successful. This is why we have brought this presentation to you today. Most people do not realize that about 2/3 of gun-related deaths are suicides. So today we are asking for your help in two ways. First, we would like you to be able to recognize the warning signs of mental health problems, especially those of a suicide crisis, and be able to help a veteran or anyone who is in crisis by providing support and referral. Secondly, we would ask that you spread the word about the importance of gun safety and distribute the free gun locks we have made available to you and your congregation. VA's theme this year is the power of one, meaning each of us can make a powerful difference in the lives of others through simple acts. Dr. Joseph Hunter and Ms. Jennifer Corradolo are suicide prevention specialists who will join me in shedding light on just how this can be done. The following presentation explains how important each of you are in the suicide prevention effort and offers specific guidance on how we can best prevent the gun-related deaths, including suicides, among veterans and service members in our communities and congregations.
Hi, my name is Dr. Joseph Hunter. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and serve as the VA's local suicide prevention coordinator. The potential to prevent gun-related deaths in our community with everyone pitching in to help is tremendous. This is because we, all of us, hold the building blocks necessary for healing spiritual and emotional wounds. And we owe it to our service members and veterans to make this happen. Most people don't realize how big the problem of suicide really is. The annual rate of suicide is over 44,000 in this country, which represents more deaths than that of HIV and that of flu deaths. Suicide actually is the 10th leading cause of death among American adults, and the suicide rate has been rising significantly each year for the past 15. Unfortunately, 20% of these suicides are by veterans, which translates into approximately 20 veteran suicides each day, and about 2/3 of these veterans are actually not in VA care. In fact, the rate of suicide for veterans among those receiving care has risen only slightly in recent years. However, it continues to skyrocket for veterans who are not in the VA system. The method of suicide most used by veterans is guns. And as Bruce just shared, about 2/3 of all gun-related deaths in the United States are suicides. The majority of these veterans dying by suicide are over 50, and many reside in rural areas. But the rates for our younger veterans, particularly women veterans, are sharply rising. I hope that I have conveyed to you not only how big the problem is, but also the tremendous opportunity we have to impact the lives of those individuals suffering from mental health disorders who need help, and as well the family members and friends who are devastated after a suicide of a loved one. We truly do hold the building blocks for healing. Next, I'd like to talk about the suicide crisis. And as you can see in this diagram, there are really three main components that we can think about, and use the analogy of combustion or a fire to talk about these. In a fire, you have to have fuel, and in this case, the fuel is the firewood. And similarly to a suicide crisis, when you look at firewood in a fireplace, it could be wet, it could be green, and it may not burn. The same is true when we're looking at someone who potentially is at risk for suicide. They may look okay on the outside. It's really hard to know if they have some underlying social or emotional vulnerabilities. So this is the first ingredient. The fire, of course, takes fuel, it takes oxygen, and it takes heat. It takes a spark. It takes that flint and steel, right, to get it started. So the next component that we're going to talk about is the oxygen. So the oxygen in a fire, obviously you can't have a fire without oxygen. And in the suicide crisis, the oxygen is psychological distress. Okay, this means simply that somebody is stressed out by their life circumstances. It can be one event, or it can be a number of things that are extremely distressing to them and leading them to have a really difficult time coping. And so that brings us to the second part of this. Just like in a fire, you have a lack of carbon dioxide and a lot of oxygen. In a suicide crisis, you have extreme distress and a lack of coping skills. Okay, so the person may not be so able or willing to identify their feelings or reach out for help. They may be self-medicating their emotional difficulties with substances, marijuana, alcohol. They may be avoiding rather than reaching out for help. So we need to be aware that these are important ingredients, not only the oxygen, that distress, but the difficulty with coping. And of course, under stress, our coping naturally is not usually as good. So these two actually go hand in hand. Finally, we have the heat, and this is the flint and steel. And I like to think of the flint is when in the mind of the individual, suicide has, for some reason, become a real option for them. There are a lot of different reasons why people think, hey, maybe if I kill myself, I'll be better off, right? Whatever the reason, that is the flint, and the other piece is the steel, and the steel is the gun, okay? The flint it's an option, and the steel is the gun, or other means in that moment of crisis, okay? So when these come together, we have a very dangerous situation, and this is often what leads to suicide, this combination of factors. I want to add one thing. You'll see in the diagram we have alcohol referenced here. Just like alcohol is an accelerant in a fire, meaning if you take pure alcohol and you throw it in the fire, it's like throwing gas and it's going to explode. The same thing happens in the suicide crisis. So we have to be mindful of the fact that alcohol actually is a depressant, that it impairs judgment, it makes people less inhibited, which means they're more likely to be impulsive. And all of those things in combination contribute to greater risk when we're talking about the suicide crisis.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good. But I have a story, and I don't know where to start.
I'm good. But I feel alone in a crowd.
I'm good. But nobody understands.
I'm good, but the past keeps coming back.
But I can't get out of bed.
And I can't sleep.
I'm good. But I feel overwhelmed.
I'm good, but I don't feel safe.
But I don't even know who I am anymore.
But I still have nightmares. But I don't need any help.
I'm good. But I don't feel anything anymore.
I'm good. But I can't live like this anymore.
I'm really not so good. But are you ready to listen?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Corradolo. I am a licensed clinical social worker and serve as the suicide prevention case manager for the local VA in Albany, New York. I'd like to help you learn to recognize the warning signs of a mental health crisis. While there are many signs that indicate that someone may be struggling with a mental illness, substance abuse, or neurological condition, these 5 signs are ones that everyone can recognize and easily identify. The 5 signs of emotional suffering are: number 1, you may notice personality changes. You may notice sudden or gradual changes in the way that someone typically behaves. People in this situation may behave in ways that don't seem to fit their values, or the person may just seem different. Number 2, you may notice that the veteran is uncharacteristically angry, anxious, agitated, or moody. You may notice the person has more frequent problems controlling his or her temper and seems irritable or unable to calm down. People in more extreme situations of this kind may be unable to sleep or may explode in anger at a minor problem. Number 3, Oftentimes, there will be a withdrawal or isolation from other people. Someone who used to be socially engaged may pull away from family and friends and stop taking part in activities that used to be enjoyable to them. In more severe cases, the person may start failing to make it to work or school. Not to be confused with the behavior of someone who is more introverted, this sign is marked by a change in a person's typical sociability, as when someone pulls away from social support, which is typically available. Number 4, in addition, he or she may neglect self-care and engage in risky behavior. You may notice a change in the person's level of personal care or in active poor judgment. For instance, someone may let personal hygiene deteriorate, or the person may start abusing alcohol or illicit substances, or engage in other self-destructive behavior that may alienate their loved ones. Number 5, finally, you may notice that the veteran appears to be overcome with hopelessness and overwhelmed by his or her circumstances. Have you noticed someone who used to be more optimistic and now can't find anything to be hopeful about? Oftentimes, this person feels trapped by life circumstances. He or she may be suffering from extreme or prolonged grief or feelings of worthlessness or guilt. People in this situation may not see a way out of their situation, or they may think that the world would be better off without them. These are strong indicators that he or she may be considering suicide as a real option. Remember, everyone has a role to play in suicide prevention. Simple, everyday connections can make a big difference to someone who is in crisis or having thoughts of suicide. Consider how you may act to just be there. Maybe calling somebody or reconnecting, meeting for coffee, going for a walk. Once you have identified someone you are concerned about, it's time to approach them about your concern. We have developed a strategy that can empower you to help our service members and veterans, should you choose to join in our mission to end gun-related deaths and suicide. This starts with the power of you, meaning your unique influence, to recognize someone who has an unmet emotional or spiritual need, to engage in a supportive conversation to understand their need, to persuade the individual to seek help and to connect them to programs and supports that can help them to address the unmet need. We offer this very simple metaphor to offer guidance on how to tap into the potential you have to make a difference. We'll start with the sun. We will talk about your stance when approaching someone of concern, and then how you uncover the unmet need and how you nudge him or her into care. The acronym SOIL offer ways to start the conversation, offers an observation of behavior, inquires about what is wrong, and listens to the thoughts and feelings of the veteran or service member. WATER, the final acronym. The W is for welcome. Welcome what they have to say. Ask. Ask the question about thoughts of suicide. Tie together all that has been said by connecting thoughts to feelings and behavior. Educate. Educate about the treatment resources. And finally, refer. Refer to specific counseling and supportive services.
The acronym SUN. The S in SUN stands for stance. You want to come from a place of care and concern. Offer a spirit of non-judgmental support and convey an attitude of providing honest feedback. The U stands for uncover. You want to go beyond I'm good. When we're asked a question, often this is our first response. In this case, though, it's important to reveal there is something up, that everything is not okay. And we want to uncover the truth. Fear, anger, pain, loneliness, whatever it is. We want to help them identify the unmet need. N stands for nudge. We want to nudge the veteran to recognize something's up, to acknowledge they are out of sorts or not themselves in some way. We want to nudge them to consider seeking help, and we want to nudge them to seek that help, to actually choose an option for help and support, and link them directly to that help.
It's important to remember a seed cannot flourish without soil. Similarly, a person will not open up without feeling genuine care and concern from you, an observant, supportive listener. In this process, we want to make it easy and comfortable for the veteran and service members to express what is wrong. The S stands for say something. Let's face it, though sometimes the hardest part is starting the conversation, rather than responding passively to warning signs of distress, find a private time and place to start the conversation. Maybe you can say, "Hey Phil, can I ask you something? I noticed you're not yourself lately. I noticed that you're not yourself lately." That simple statement, "I noticed you're not yourself lately." This starts a very important dialogue. Oh, the O stands for observe. The next thing to do is observe what you say that makes them seem to not be themselves. Use a "you seem" statement. For example, "You seem distant today." It's very important to use a neutral description. We don't want to raise defensiveness or convey criticism in any way. Neutral, not critical observations would include words like distant or distracted, frustrated or on edge, worried, or even tired. The I in soil stands for inquire. So you've opened up a dialogue. You made a non-offensive observation that comes from a place of genuine care and concern. It's time to use an open-ended question to start uncovering the seed, that unmet need, a hidden set of feelings and thoughts that are troubling to the veteran or service member. Again, offer an open-ended question and not one that can be answered with a yes or no. Specifically, you can ask one of these questions. What's going on? What's on your mind? Penny for your thought? Or what gives? The L stands for listen. This may be the hardest part of the process, to listen without judgment, without immediate advice, without interruption, to observe body language, to recognize feelings, to recognize a specific worry or concern that will be expressed as a thought.
If you have taken him or her to this point, if you have him or her talking, you've already made a really big difference. Water is the third ingredient here. We talked about the sun, we talked about the soil, but water will enliven the growth of a seed. Similarly, the following steps will foster a further opening up and then offer direction for help. Beyond listening, we want to welcome the W in water, the information shared, to encourage the veteran to say more. Specifically, using a restatement is a very powerful way to help someone open up further about a concern. Here's an example of how to make a restatement. After starting the discussion, you learn that this veteran, we'll say in this example that this is your cousin, has not been sleeping well. So she goes on to say to you, "I'm just not getting enough rest. I feel like I'm tossing and turning all night." Quite simply, you might say back, "So you're doing a lot of tossing and turning throughout the night." This is the restatement. A likely response to your restatement from your cousin would be, "Yeah, I often wake up with my heart racing sometimes, and I have dreams about getting blown up. Then, after a long night of this, I wake up feeling like I don't get any sleep at all." So we want to welcome the veteran to open up and share this information, and we do this by offering support and a listening ear. We invite them to say more about what's going on, and specifically, it's extremely important to use this restatement to further explore what is happening. Again, the restatement is saying back to them in their own words what they just shared with you. A in water stands for ask. By this time, you're starting to have a good idea of what's troubling the veteran or service member. It's important that you ask additional questions that may help you gauge how bad things are for him or her. Many of our veterans experience horrible, unthinkable situations while serving our country. They may be embarrassed or ashamed to discuss them. They may be trying to avoid memories of past events because they're painful. As we ask questions, this may become very apparent. Unfortunately, when these deeper issues are not addressed, there's a greater risk that the veteran may consider suicide as an option to escape these memories and feelings. So we must approach the veteran with a great deal of concern and respect as we seek to understand what is going on from their perspective. When they appear to be struggling significantly, it's important to ask about suicidality. Ask the question, are you thinking of taking your own life? If the answer is yes, ask about how serious those thoughts are. Do you have a plan? Are you seriously considering carrying out your plan? Throughout this process, use open-ended questions. They invite a discussion versus a yes-no response. Seek to understand his or her perspective And do ask that very direct question, are you having thoughts or are you thinking about taking your own life? T in water stands for tie together. You're on the home stretch at this point. You started a very important dialogue, you uncovered an unaddressed issue or an unmet need, and you've started the healing process just through this dialogue alone, but it's time to bring it home. The next step is to tie it all together. You want to offer feedback about what you've observed and heard. You might say something like this: I think I understand why you seemed not yourself and looked distant in recent days. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the date that your friend John was killed by a roadside bomb, and you've been thinking a lot about him as a result. I can understand why you would feel very down and sad, as you have said to me. And it sounds like you may even blame yourself for what happened. Tying it all together, as you can see from this example, you're doing the following. You're summarizing their thinking, you're relating their thinking to their feelings, but you're also relating those thoughts and feelings to your original observations. You don't seem yourself, etc. E in water stands for educate. Now it's time to let this veteran or service member know that he or she is not alone, that other veterans struggle with very similar challenges, and there are resources available to provide support and guidance. This is the opportunity to provide education about the VA program, the local faith-based programs, other community resources that are available. Provide the name and number of the clergy member that would be involved, the suicide prevention coordinator in your area, the veteran service officer. You can even program these into your phone now or write them down on a card that you keep in your wallet, so you're prepared to immediately provide this contact information. That's very important. Depending on the situation, you might also provide literature or recommend websites so that the veteran or service member can educate him or herself. We would recommend you always offer a keychain or a wristband and talk about the Veterans Crisis Line at the very least. I mean, this is available 24/7. They really should know about it. Finally, the R in water stands for refer. This is the very last step, the clincher, if you will. Our goal is to link the veteran or service member to help. Pathways to receiving spiritual and emotional healing come in many forms, and there truly is no wrong door so long as he or she seeks further assistance. Encouraging treatment is a critical part of this process. You may say something like, this is an opportunity to get on top of this problem before things get worse and start the next chapter of your life. Or you may say, if your heart is failing, or if your car breaks down, don't you see the expert? Why wouldn't you with something like this? How is this any different? In addition to educating about available resources, it may be necessary to offer to call on behalf of the veteran or even join them in seeking that help, at least initially. There's one important caveat to all of this, and that is if a veteran or service member is reporting thoughts of suicide with a specific plan to end his or her own life or harm others, we must not delay in connecting them to the professionals. If he or she is not willing to talk to someone on the crisis line, or one of the suicide prevention specialists at the VA right away, we want to call 911 or go to the nearest emergency room. Under these circumstances, an immediate plan for their safety is critical. Also, when referring someone for urgent or emergency care, be sure that you do not leave them alone, meaning you don't want to leave them by themselves, and there should always be another person present with them at all times until you connect them to the help that you're handing them off to. And also, be sure to pass along the information shared with you about any plan they had or any other important information. So for example, if they said they had a gun, or they just bought a gun, or if they stockpiled medication, pass that information along.
We have made a wallet-sized reminder card to help you remember this process. We encourage you to keep this in your wallet or purse or on your person and practice this dialogue with a friend or family member until you are comfortable with this process. In addition, we are providing gun locks and other materials to aid in this process, including keychains and wristbands. We hope that you will liberally give these materials out. We will now go to a dialogue affectionately entitled, Remember Uncle George.
I'm not sure Marcus is okay. He looks very tired and disheveled. He's been more irritable with his wife Sue lately. He hasn't gone to church in over 2 months. He used to go every week. Maybe I should see what's going on with him. Let me think this through. Son, S. Stance. Be open, honest, non-judgmental. Okay, I can do that. You, uncover the truth. The unmet need. And nudge. Nudge him to get help. Okay, I can do this. Can I ask you something?
Yeah?
You don't seem yourself lately.
What do you mean?
I don't know. You seem distracted, worried, something. What's going on?
I'm fine.
No, something is definitely up. What gives?
You wouldn't understand.
Try me. Let's see. I'm all ears.
The dream is back.
The dream from Vietnam? Really?
Yeah, really.
Is this the one where you're being chased by the Viet Cong through the jungle?
That's the one.
How long has this been going on?
Weeks. I haven't had a good night's sleep in weeks. I'm restless, tossing and turning for hours.
So you've been having this nightmare for weeks, tossing and turning every night?
I wake up terrified and completely covered in sweat. I'm too old for this stuff.
And you're experiencing intense fear at the same time?
Yeah. That and shame because of what we did in the village. I see the faces of the children. I just can't take this anymore. I'm exhausted and fed up.
How bad is this? Are you having thoughts of taking your own life? You know, thoughts of suicide?
Yeah, of course. Every morning, I feel like a shell of a person. Like I'm dead inside. I don't want to be a drag on Sue or anyone. I think you're better off without me.
I'm really glad you told me about this. I'm sorry things have been so bad lately. Have you considered a specific plan?
My gun has been loaded with a bullet for past month. Just one pull of the trigger and this all goes away. Yeah, you can say I have a plan.
Well, at least I understand what's wrong. You really have not been yourself. You've been very upset, which explains why you've been so tired and why you've been so irritable and isolated lately. I'm so sorry that you're having such a hard time. And you're right, I was not in Vietnam. And so I can't fully understand that experience. But I do understand that you are experiencing nightmares that bring intense feelings of fear and shame. I've also been worried. Worried that your behavior is somehow a burden on us, your friends and family. For one, I'm glad to know the truth. I would rather that than having you hurt or kill yourself. I'm here for you. I've got your back.
Thanks, that means a lot to me.
Well, I think you're having symptoms of PTSD. And I know you're not alone. Uncle George went through the same thing after the Korean War. Remember how angry he seemed all the time? Then he went to the VA, and when we saw him next, he was like a new person. I think the VA can help you too.
Yeah, I do remember.
Or perhaps you can talk to Pastor Brian about this. He's helped a lot of veterans. I also know that there is a Veterans Crisis line that you can call. You should be able to get help when you wake up in the middle of the night. Here, give me your phone and I'll punch the number in for you. And I think I've got a keychain with that number on too. I'll get it for you. Listen, man, you're not alone, okay?
You're right. I know you're right. Thanks for caring.
Now, about that gun. Let me take that off your hands. For now. You don't need to do anything that can't be undone. The situation will get better after you get some help for those dreams and nightmares.
I'm not giving up my gun. You can forget that idea. I may never get it back knowing you.
Okay, but I insist we put a gun lock on it for now, and I'll hold the key. Fair?
Sure, bro. You can lock it up, but you can't take it.
Okay. And let's call over to the VA for now. At the very least, they can treat those nightmares with medication. All right? Hi, my name is Harold Smith, and I'm here with my brother Marcus, who is a Vietnam-era veteran. He's been having nightmares and thoughts of suicide. He has a gun, but I've locked that up for now. He's willing to come in and get some help. Can you tell us what the process is to get started? We trust we have conveyed how simple and effective this process can be. Each part is important, and as a whole, it can be tremendously effective. Again, we encourage you to practice this process. Practice with a friend or family member. And remember, it does not have to be perfect. The most important aspect of this dialogue is that you convey care and concern.
I'm going to talk briefly about the Veterans Crisis Line. After 9 years in operation, the Veterans Crisis Line has taken over 2.5 million calls and rescued over 66,000 veterans and service members in crisis. As you can see, the VA offers much more than a crisis line. By going to the National VA website, a veteran or service member can take a self-test to explore the meaning of his or her own mental health symptoms, or use the chat option to talk to the crisis line responders directly through a one-on-one chat. Also, a text option, 838-255, has been very popular with our veterans.
So as you can see, the Veterans Crisis Line is an incredible resource, and it's important that all veterans and service members know they can call at any time, 24/7. We are now going to turn our attention to the importance of securing guns to create a barrier to an impulsive act. As this video showed, the danger of gun accidents or violence is very real. However, guns can be secured. This simply makes everyone safer, and nobody's Second Amendment rights have to be affected. So let's review the facts about guns. Guns are lethal, there's no question, whether it's due to accident or by other or self-directed violence. When the use of guns is for violence towards self or others, it's going to be lethal. In addition, it also often involves an impulsive act, meaning they're doing it without really thinking through the consequences. And unfortunately, with guns, it's an act that can't be undone. Therefore, creating barriers to an impulsive act or to an accident with a weapon is a very important strategy to prevent suicide and promote safety in the home. In a moment of crisis, suicide may seem like the best option. However, situations that drive suicide urges and intent are momentary, and difficult situations improve. And in fact, most people who attempt suicide and live are very glad they're still alive. There are sensible strategies that can be employed to prevent unintended deaths by guns. In truth, the best strategy to prevent unintended death by guns is to ensure that there is no access to those guns, which is accomplished by at least temporarily removing them from the home and other areas of easy access, especially during times when there's heightened risk for self or other directed harm, or when children might access those weapons. Alternatively, locking a gun in a gun cabinet and giving the key or combination to others, especially during times of risk, as I said, creates a barrier to an impulsive act. Placing gun locks on the guns and giving those keys to someone else for safekeeping is another strategy to reduce impulsive deadly violence. Finally, removing all the bullets from access or locking them separately without access by key or combination can also be an effective method. You can't shoot a gun without the bullets.
The sniper just popped up out of this little hole, and he fired, and opened fire. And I remember saying, God, make it stop. And it didn't stop. A couple guys got wounded. And I marked that as the day I gave up the God of my childhood, because that God just didn't make sense. So for 10 years, I didn't have that support system because there was no church where I felt welcome or felt I could belong.
When I joined the military, I was very religious. I felt God gave up on me. One day, after a really bad day, I literally cursed God, man. And it was something that I was brought up not to do.
I was raised in a parochial school system, and I went on to a Jesuit college, Jesuit training. After Vietnam, there was a period there of a number of years that I didn't do anything.
As I was drinking, I was not going to church. That was the last thing on my mind. My mom would take my boys to church. But, of course, I wasn't into it. I was raised in church, but I just kind of lingered away from it.
That was one of the things that I lost over in Vietnam. I lost my faith in God. Couldn't understand how he could allow some of the things that I saw.
Spirituality is a very delicate subject when depression and mental illness or whatever, mental health, because there's that stigma that, well, you have God, you shouldn't have depression. But I was always talking to my pastor. I've always had a spiritual authority that I submitted to, and he encouraged me. He says, no, that's not the case. You take medicine for cholesterol. Mental illness is a disease that you can help. Don't feel guilty. You don't feel guilty for diabetes. You don't feel guilty for getting the flu. Let's treat this.
That's when I started branching out, talking to teachers in church and finding out, hey, there's vets in church here. And one of them's a licensed counselor, very good at it. And he sat down and we talk, and he offers suggestions and pointers.
I started going back to church. I talked with the bishop of my church, and we started working through a few things, and he suggested I go see somebody. He was a psychiatrist that went to the same church I did. He was very understanding. He helped bring some religious end of it, which brought me some healing, I felt.
Once I got my head clear on that, many, many years ago, I got back into my faith and very, very active in my faith.
I started reading the daily word every day, and that strengthened me. And the more I was in church, the better I felt.
I turned to my church, and they helped me with my faith. and my belief to also not take things into my own hand and to begin to change myself for the better.
There's people out there that want to help you. There's excellent programs. Try to find a faith-based organization, whatever your faith may be, and begin to find yourself again, but get the help that's needed. It's there for you.
Developing a sense of trust and a sense of faith in the universe, in a higher power, in God, and whatever word works for whoever you are. I'm not religious in the sense that a lot of people would recognize, but I think that my spirituality was absolutely crucial to my recovery.
On behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs, our suicide prevention team, and chaplain service, I would like to thank you for being part of this enormously important endeavor. Our veterans have served us. Mindful of the invisible wounds that torment many of our veterans, we can now serve them.